Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for a conversation on TASC, democratizing data for community planning. We're really excited to share our work with you this evening as part of Open Data Week. My name is Spencer Williams. I'm the Director of Advocacy here at the Municipal Art Society. In a moment, I'll be joined with some colleagues from MAS as well as the Regional Plan Association to share with you this work. Just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. We'll have a presentation. As questions come up, feel free to use the Q&A function. We'll have some time at the end of our presentation to address as many questions as possible. I want to thank you again for joining us for this presentation, and I'm going to kick it over to my colleague, Tom Devane.
Thank you, Spencer. Good afternoon, everyone. I guess we could call it evening as well. And thank you for attending. My name is Tom Devaney, and I'm the Senior Director of Land Use and Planning at the Municipal Art Society of New York. Over the past 18 months, MAS and the Regional Plan Association and NYU Guarini Center on Environmental, Energy, and Land Use Law have been collaborating on a exciting initiative and land use mapping tool that we call TASC, Technical Support an advancement for comprehensive planning and CEQR reform. If we were all in the same room together, I would probably take a quick poll to see how many people are familiar with city environmental quality review, but seeing that we're not, CEQR is the process by which the environmental impacts of discretionary land use decisions, such as rezonings, by authorized city agencies, typically Department of City Planning on behalf of City Planning Commission for most city projects, are disclosed and assessed for significance. The analytical framework for CEQR evaluations is called the reasonable worst case development scenario, and it represents the fullest extent of projected development resulting from a land use action, say a rezoning, over the course of typically 10 years. And it is the basis for evaluating the impacts of a project. Also part of the evaluation is what we call soft site analysis. And soft sites are sites within a rezoning area where specific plans for development have not been formalized, but development may be fostered by the rezoning in the future. The methodology for determining the reasonable worst case development scenario, soft sites, and impact evaluation criteria is contained in the CEQR Technical Manual, which is the Bible for CEQR consultants working on environmental review projects. TASC is the logical continuation of work that MAS, RPA, and NYU have done over the past years in looking at how inherent deficiencies in the CEQR methodology can be addressed to paint a more accurate and reliable picture of future development, so that impacts such as residential and business displacement can be mitigated or addressed in the planning process. But in the spirit of open data, TASC is about democratizing data for community and comprehensive planning and CEQR reform, a tool that can be used by practitioners, communities, and elected officials. And with that, I will bring Spencer back to tell you more about our project.
Thanks, Tom. So our project between RPA, NYU, and MAS has been building on longstanding work across our organizations in terms of looking for strategies to bring about a more equitable and sort of inclusive city, and thinking about ways that comprehensive planning, changes to the way that the city does environmental and land use review, can be improved. And so RPA's Inclusive City Report is a really great example of that. MAS's A Tale of Two Rezonings took a harder look at sort of a retrospective look at Long Island City and downtown Brooklyn to sort of see how accurate were those land use projections, and how could that process have maybe better anticipated some of the changes that we saw, particularly in downtown Brooklyn, in which the area was designated for a lot of commercial growth, but ended up seeing a lot of residential growth, which had impacts on everything from transportation to schools to open space. More recently, RPA has published their pushed out report, which looks at housing displacement and unaffordability across the region. It's really important that we also have a regional look as a part of these different types of data sets that can really help us understand and pinpoint issues as they exist across the region, and also to put the New York City context into the broader tri-state area context. More recently, last year, our partners at NYU released their report, Reforming CEQR, which highlighted 4 different recommendations for really improving the quality of both issue identification in terms of problems that might be anticipated and those impacts, and how to mitigate those impacts to really make that process much more streamlined, but also lead to better outcomes. So the process as it stands currently is really top down. Many communities have been seeing impacts. There's this highly technical process that often comes in the form of multiple hundreds of pages, including appendices that can be really hard to navigate. It's really reliant on data to sort of ask and answer those questions. What we then see in response to that is a really strong sort of community response from the grassroots that are really looking to insert additional things into the conversation. Those can be things around displacement risk, neighborhood culture, character, business interests, or particular local impacts around transportation, construction, a whole host of needs that may not be addressed by the current framework that's outlined in the environmental review process. This unfortunately leads to like a very limited place where these two groups and these two processes can meet in the middle. That leads to a lot of distrust. We've seen lawsuits and really a difference in opinion on sort of what data is accurate in showing the full picture to really support the decision makers in city council and the mayor on land use applications throughout the city. Data, and particularly open data, can really help lift the community up into this process. Oftentimes we look to data as a way to answer questions. In CEQR, we can use data to ask more and better questions to get to more nuance, to really understand what's going on at a neighborhood level. By really daylighting some of the factors that go into things like what makes a site developable, how do we understand displacement, what are some of the underlying infrastructure pieces, as well as health considerations, equipping community members with the ability to ask and answer some basic and more sophisticated questions. We believe that the technocratic sort of land use process can be fundamentally improved as it gives people a more level playing field and increases the amount of trust, partnership, and communication between the technocratic processes and the communities that are looking to engage with them. And so when we think about sort of who's at that table, as Tom mentioned earlier in talking about CEQR, it's really critical that both community boards, community members, elected officials, the planning commission, city agencies, academic institutions are really looking at the city with the same data and understanding sort of here are the impacts as described, or here's what these data points might suggest. When that table comes together, you're able to really look at how those different perspectives can influence how people understand the place around them. As you can imagine, community members might be coming to a different set of outcomes with the same data that planners and developers might be looking at. And so while a planner and developer might be looking at where's a really great place to grow and looking at factors like access to transportation, proximity to parks, high performing schools, unused development rights, community members may really be worrying about, are there enough seats in those schools? Or is there adequate park access? and really bringing different sort of levels of emphasis to different aspects in that. And so there needs to be a really robust opportunity for those groups to come together to really support and participatory environmental review, where community members and the technical applicants can both ask and answer really fundamental questions that ultimately inform better decisions. This also has a lot of applications in community-based planning, whether that is something as simple as community boards district needs assessment that is looking at things like park access or transportation issues. It gives those types of processes the ability to put a neighborhood in context to the rest of the borough or the broader city as a whole. And so can really help to highlight, while there may be unique and particular needs that are coming to fore for a particular neighborhood, it's important to think about how those needs compare with citywide needs as well. Ideally, these sets of tools can also be really helpful for other types of community-based planning. For example, a community being able to look at sort of development pressure might accelerate the opportunity for a community to pursue a historic designation, as an example. And so if there's a particular set of neighborhood issues, this allows the community to be proactive by equipping them with the data. And then lastly, comprehensive planning has been a hot topic in New York City over the last couple of months. Certainly the Speaker Johnson has proposed a new way of communities across the city evaluating multiple plans, but also looking at what a sort of robust citywide analysis, statement of citywide needs might look like. So data can really help us bring some of those analysis processes to scale, but it can also help look at the differences between approaches. And so what may be appropriate for East New York may not be appropriate for the North Shore of Staten Island. It's important that these tools can really speak to all of these different applications, but underlying it all is really great access to data. And to speak on that, I'm going to hand that over to my colleague, Marcel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marcel Negret. I'm a senior planner with the Regional Plan Association. And I'll give a quick overview of the structure of the index. Putting a comprehensive list of indicators into a single data structure or index facilitates analysis that will help understand potential interrelations among categories, namely built environment and social ones. This slideshow shows a snapshot of the indicators that we've compiled so far. Hopefully we'll get to include many more. We know that social and environmental factors, such as the metrics that Spencer just mentioned, access to employment, transit, housing choice, and conditions, have long been established as determinants of health. And it is clear that the pandemic has further exposed the inequities in our society and city, which emphasizes the need to better understand the intersectionalities across social and built environmental factors. So the selection of these metrics provides a baseline that allows for the exploration of interrelations across the indicators in the context of New York City. For example, we can explore the nexus between permitted floor area ratio and the number of new building construction to determine factors that drive development decisions, or in order to provide insight and determine social vulnerabilities. For instance, we can identify the correlation between the share of labor force in service occupations, which largely overlap what we generally refer to as essential workers, and the crude prevalence of diagnosed diabetes. In fact, among social factors, the share of labor force tends to show the greatest correlations with chronic diseases. The selection of these indicators was based on peer review process and input from community-based organizations, academia, and industry experts. The data sources are based on information from various levels of government, For the most part, social factors are coming from the US Census and the American Community Survey. That's at the federal level. The state level, we're pulling information to inform the opportunity areas, which is an incentive program for economic redevelopment. And we also accessed throngs of data from the New York City Open Data Portal and specific data sets from the Department of City Planning housed in bytes of the Big Apple. In addition to cleaning and compiling all the data together, we applied some spatial procedures like a geometric network analysis to classify parcel level information and the proximity to certain types of infrastructure and services. And with this information, we were able to classify walking distances to parks, transit stations based on actual sidewalk infrastructure. The index is built at the tax law level to help with aggregation and allow for deeper analysis of land use decisions, which by nature are at the scale of lots and parcels. And CEQR currently analyzes neighborhood, census tract, and lot level conditions. But there's important trade-offs that need to be assessed or understood when performing a scaling analysis. Generally speaking, when you request multiple crosstabs, or that's another way to say just an elaborate data query, the analysis will be less geographically localized. On the other hand, the less specific your data query is, the more localized you can be in the geographic scale. When I say multiple crosstabs, I mean getting more specific in the more specific data queries that you're asking for. For example, trying to quantify the number of healthcare workers within a particular income bracket and by demographic composition. You can probably obtain reliable estimates for the city as a whole, or perhaps at county level, where there are enough samples to obtain something that is statistically significant, but you won't be able to estimate this for the more localized geographies like census tracts or parcels. This trade-off is set by the limited number of samples obtained through census and ACS response surveys. Just to go over the structure, the index follows this hierarchical data composition that groups individual metrics by theme. So we went over the general factors, social and built environmental factors shown in pink and blue. We have specific themes that refer to things like regulatory frameworks, real estate, socioeconomic, housing, health outcomes. And then we have the individual indicators, which are like things like FAR or flow area ratio, the population below poverty line. And then each indicator has data points, the total estimates and the shares. In the case of social factors, this is derived from the census, but we also added flags indicating percentile ranks. So we ranked each indicator as a percentile, comparing that specific geography to the city as a whole. So depending on the specific metric, like a census tract in the upper quartile may indicate a high concentration of vulnerability that is relative to the city as a whole. So for the social indicators compiled, we used Boolean values to flag geographies with these percentile ranks in the upper quartiles. The more flags any given census tract has, the greater number of compounding social vulnerabilities and therefore potential displacement risk. To illustrate this, I will hand it off to my colleague Caroline to go over some case studies on how this might play in real data queries that community-based organizations or individuals participating in land use decisions may look into.
Thank you, Marcel. So I'm Caroline Thompson, currently a project manager for data and planning at MAS. So just to illustrate how our analysis works, I'm going to go through the local and citywide context, starting with Bushwick. And we'll use a series of screenshots and discuss more about tool development in a few minutes. So if you're not familiar with Bushwick, community groups put together a neighborhood plan, which was at odds with a city-led rezoning effort. And the rezoning ultimately did not move forward, but the neighborhood continues to experience stresses. So we chose a couple of indicators to look at the variety of factors that the community district may experience, just based on our discussions with community groups, as well as vulnerabilities identified at this and other past rezonings. So our analysis filters all of the tax lots in the city by a combination of indicators. So here we'll start with the parcels and census tracts where the number of new building permits issued is in the highest quartile of permits issued citywide. So we use this indicator to show localized development trends or hot areas with a high share of real estate interest compared to other areas in the city. And these areas are likely to continue to see a lot of new development or real estate interest. We can then narrow down these parcels to show those within a 5-minute walk to a subway entrance. These lots are more likely to be developed than their more distant neighbors, since they provide nearby access to workplaces and other destinations in the city. Then we can go a little bit further and narrow down to the tax lots that also have more than 50% of their development rights available, which are shown in this lavender mauve color. This criterion is the only one of the built criteria that we've shown that is currently evaluated under CEQR soft-site analysis. And these lots have buildings which are smaller than existing zoning allows, and they have a higher likelihood of being developed because additional floor area is allowed as of right or without a rezoning. So taken together, these lavender lots have the highest likelihood of being redeveloped based on the criteria we've chosen. We also wanted to evaluate the social impacts at this level. So we've outlined in hot pink all of the lots with the highest development potential that are also in census tracts with a high number of housing cost burdened renters and homeowners. So since these renters or homeowners will spend over 30% of their income on housing costs, they may not be able to weather expense increases and are more likely to be displaced. So here we can see that populations most likely to be at risk of displacement based on the factors that we've defined are located near 2 stops along Myrtle Avenue and also along Broadway and Bushwick Avenue to the south. We can also use TASC at the citywide level to support broader policy decisions, particularly in goal setting for comprehensive planning or for identifying priority service areas. So using the same criteria we've used from the Bushwick example, we can see that areas with a high number of new building permits issued are mostly concentrated in the South Bronx, along the East River waterfront in Brooklyn and Queens, along the far west side of Manhattan, and then also in the coastal areas in Southern Queens and Staten Island. Filtering for parcels within a 5-minute walk of a subway station, we can see the shift to areas that are reached within subway access that are closer to the core of the city with less reach in the outer edges. Layering in parcels with over 50% development rights available, we can see that this narrows to areas scattered throughout the 5 boroughs with a lot of parcels with high development potential located along Atlantic Avenue and Broadway in Brooklyn, some sites in the Lower East Side and in West Harlem, scattered throughout the Bronx and Staten Island, and then in neighborhood centers in Queens and also Long Island City. And finally, we just want to layer on the census tracts with housing cost burdened renters and homeowners to show the social component. So we can more clearly see the tax lots with the highest development potential and in census tracts with populations at risk of displacement are also located throughout the city, from the Bushwick Bed-Stuy area in Brooklyn to the North Shore of Staten Island, the South Bronx, and then Astoria and Elmhurst in Queens as well. So as planners, we empirically know this to be true, but having this data validates where these vulnerabilities and risks are much more likely to be located so that we can not only share this knowledge with community members who are looking to make their own plans, but also help planners and city officials to more accurately focus their planning support to these areas. So just to hand it back to Spencer to talk about the next phases of the project.
Thanks, Caroline. As we've demonstrated through our work to date, we've compiled these key data sets into a citywide index. That's really helpful to be able to look at these different types of patterns. But in order to move that work forward, over the next year or so, we will be looking to take this from this sort of static index to an interactive web map. We're hopeful that this map can help build capacity for community-based planning. And to do that, we're going to be soliciting feedback from a series of focus groups across the 5 boroughs, across a bunch of different user types, to really dial in what are the key questions and queries that different users have, and how do we then put all of those into one place so that people can begin to understand those different perspectives, ask better questions, and to continue to sort of refine both this map, but also the sort of supporting advocacy tools to help community members and other users participate in the land use and environmental review process. A good example of that would be this tool could currently be used in the part of scoping for environmental review. By using this map during that process, it may not answer all of the questions that community members might have, but it may highlight that additional questions need to be asked as an applicant prepares an environmental impact statement. And so having this information can help solidify and represent things that community members already sort of know to be true. And so we're hopeful then that through that iterative process of working with different communities, that we will be able to release an interactive version of this map that has that sort of user functionality embedded, so that sort of a wide range of users can find this tool really helpful. So a really novice person who may be new to the land use process can sort of click on a button and get an answer to a common query and be supplied with sort of some rationale of why those things have been put together and what that might mean, how to begin to interpret that information, or a sort of more sophisticated data user could create their own query to begin to identify sites based on a variety of these factors and indicators. Looking further down the road, it's really helpful that we not just have sort of a static image of the city, so that we can look back to see what kind of trends have been observable, to then take those trends to look forward to see if those were to continue, where might we anticipate future development or displacement or infrastructure to happen. And so being able to have a map of the city that looks at, say, 2010 or 2000 with its community infrastructure and census data alongside parks and transit, to really look at what factors may be contributing to why certain places have developed at a higher rate than others. We'll want to continue to review this work and these methods for modeling and tweaking and emphasizing different aspects of the data for different uses with community groups and peer organizations, and ultimately integrate what we've learned into an interactive modeling tool that helps better facilitate sort of future casting of different development outcomes for the city for its application. So taken together, we are hopeful that access to this data alongside really critical training can improve CEQR by democratizing data and improving the quality of questions that get asked during the CEQR process. That information can then strengthen the city's ULURP or land use review process, because with better data and better information, we'll have more trust and better decisions and better accounting for impacts and mitigation. We're also hopeful that this can really support community-based planning by providing resources for communities to be really proactive. Oftentimes, community groups are responding to a private application or a city planning process. This will really help give that information that would previously need to be tied to a staff person to communities to be able to forward and continue critical conversations in their neighborhoods. And lastly, tools like this can really be helpful in scaling up that sort of small scale community-based planning to meaningful citywide planning. It's critical that citywide or comprehensive planning be able to speak across scales to account for and acknowledge citywide trends and needs, but also be really responsive to those local level concerns and different aspects that might vary neighborhood to neighborhood. So we're hopeful that you'll continue to sort of track us in this work over the coming years. We hope to bring forward more tools to really support robust planning in the city, and hope that sort of data and capacity building for communities is really at the center of that. And so with that, I think we will open it to some questions. I'm going to invite all of my colleagues to rejoin the stage. Right. Everyone. Okay. Gonna start with this question for all of us. Has the TASC team considered partnering with other local nonprofits or community groups to identify lots or city-owned land vulnerable to development pressure in order to turn them into community land trusts? I think there's a lot of information out there around city-owned and operated land. MAS did some work around this issue a couple of years back on our public assets work that really looked at sort of public land as sort of the sixth borough in the city. There's a high volume of land available. Some of those may not necessarily be developable. They may be small slivers of lots. There continues to be a lot of interest from community groups through our Livable Neighborhoods program at MAS around community land trust as a way to really bring about vital community spaces. I think the pandemic has really highlighted that as well. I think we've seen a rise of mutual aid groups that have been looking for community space to do food distribution, to provide community resources, we've seen folks come together to provide space for art. I think there are a lot of applications there. Marcel, did you want to add something?
I guess I would just say that to define development pressures, I think the aspect that you mentioned, Spencer, related to the modeling aspect, in order to do that, we need to do a retrospective analysis. We need to look at these same indicators back in time, hopefully 10, 20 years ago, if we can't even further back, to see those trends and how they've been evolving over time. And with that information, we could assume that to an extent, some of those trends that in a specific neighborhood in the city, a given variable, which we might consider associated with development pressure, we can assume that might continue to the future. And so I think that doing that time series analysis or that retrospective analysis for the city as a whole will be really important to complement some of the, I guess, anecdotal experience that you can see, so that we have a common ground of what are the trends for the city as a whole. And so I would just add that doing the retrospective analysis and the time series to define those variables related to development or to social vulnerabilities will be key.
Thanks, Marcel. Tom, I'm going to start this next question with you. What additional data would be helpful that isn't sort of readily publicly available? I know that you have on your office have a beloved Zelda poster outside of your office, but are there any other data sets that come to mind that would be really helpful if the city disclosed them?
Well, one of the things is an unknown factor is rent stabilized units across the city. There's, as Marcel knows, Marcel has banged his head against the wall trying to find that information, but it's not mapped. Also about
I think we'll come back to Tom on the data question. Caroline, did you have anything that you wanted to add on the data sets or things that we looked at and pulling this together that didn't come together?
Sure. Yeah, I think it was we've had to use a lot of different data sets and combine them together in order to provide some more insights into the ways that some of these data sets work together to influence the built environment. So outside of rent regulated units, we're also considering like, of course, adding in other data sets like capital projects that have been crowdsourced recently, or other kind of indicators that are more closely used with the real estate sector. Also, it'd be interesting to see kind of air rights or zoning lots versus tax lots, any kind of other additional information that could provide greater insight.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we have found time and time again is that, you know, there's no information about lot mergers and transfer of development rights, because these are as of right processes that don't really get covered under CEQR. And we have found in our research and our reports and in our coverage of current rezonings and past rezonings that that information is what happens is those sites get developed. Sites that aren't part of a rezoning per se, that aren't evaluated, they end up getting developed, and so those impacts don't get evaluated in an EIS. So that's something that we think that TASC gets to that more nuanced level about, you know, we know that through lot mergers, even small sites that ordinarily wouldn't get developed, if they're combined, then you have a very developable site, and those things don't get covered under CEQR evaluations. So Caroline's absolutely right.
And Marcel, you spoke a little bit about this earlier, and I think this is somewhat related, but what are some of the trade-offs in being able to combine queries across your different scales? Like, what are some of those limitations that we would otherwise miss? Like, with good intentions, maybe asking a great question, but having sort of imprecise results. Like, what's the danger in the reach of the data accuracy?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you said it, accuracy. That's the first one, I think, especially going back to that slide showing the different geographies and how they scale, scaling analysis. That trade-off is important to understand, because if you're asking having multiple crosstabs of information, and you also want to be specific when it comes to a geography. So you want to understand whether the conditions at the lot level or at the census tract level, just a number of samples that we obtain through surveys from the American Community Survey or the census are just limited, meaning that the margin of error will increase to a point where we can no longer consider that to be statistical significant. And so I think understanding that's like one important trade-off is the imbalance between how detailed you can get with the queries and how localized you can be in your geographic unit. And then I guess the second trade-off is kind of that balance between the anecdotal experience from, you know, someone who's been living in a neighborhood and has been observing a number of trends that might be particular to that specific geography, that neighborhood, but may not necessarily be applicable to, you know, somewhere else in the Bronx or, you know, wherever. And so I think it is important. I just want to underscore the importance of doing the look back or the retrospective analysis, the time series for the city as a whole, so that we could have that baseline of information to then compare how those trends over time compare to those anecdotal experiences.
Yeah, there's another question here around sort of asking, will the data sets be dynamic? As an example of, you know, that sort of highest quartile of development, there's value of doing that sort of citywide. Can you do that sort of analysis to sort of recalibrate at a borough level or a more localized level? Would you get a different map or different results to sort of say, instead of, are you the highest quintile in the city, are you the highest quintile in Brooklyn? Might give you a slightly different map. And I guess, what sort of applications of that kind of nuance do you see being incorporated as we embark on the sort of next research phase of the work?
I mean, yeah, right now we don't have that capacity, but certainly that's something that we would hope for to be able to develop, make it dynamic. Just to underscore what I just said, like part of the caveat there, you could do some modeling to figure out and kind of work around some of the limitations that I mentioned about the number of samples and the margin of error, but there will be a limit. And so I guess depending on how dynamic and thinking about the geographic scale of your analysis, we might hit a barrier, and just depends on the availability that we might have to do modeling and statistical analysis to kind of go around that. There's some good examples out there that demonstrate that it is doable, kind of go around these limitations, but is certainly not a simple task. And so it will require a lot of brain power and hours with caffeine trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it would also be useful for our web map as well. We hope that this will be able to be used as a comparative analysis tool. So you could actually look at the aggregation of community district factors and compare to a borough level or compare to a citywide level. So having that kind of dynamic geography to say, like, as Spencer said, you know, like, this is within this area, this is the highest, like, hottest place for new development, but it's not for citywide. So kind of comparing those values within scales will be really important.
Tom, I'm going to direct this next question to you. I think it's a question about how climate change and sea level rise has been considered, especially for coastal neighborhoods in New York. I know that there's a lot going on with zoning for coastal resiliency, the East Side Coastal Resilience Projects, of which you've commented on extensively over the last year or so. But what is sort of changing with the science and the thinking about how to incorporate that information when it comes to development in the city?
Well, it's a really interesting question, because we wrestled with this when we were trying to come up with the indexes and all these factors into development. For example, waterfront development. Waterfront development is as attractive as it's ever been, and so we thought perhaps that if we were going to have a layer about or a factor about development in the floodplain, but you know, when we were sort of conceptualizing and we were peer reviewing, it was a factor that it didn't prevent development being on the waterfront. So we didn't factor in floodplain, but it's a very nuanced element to development, and so we're still trying to find ways of fine tuning it, but I can't say that there's a factor that's a quantifiable factor for developability of sites in the future with climate change in mind. But trust me, that's something that that we need to consider as we start tweaking the modeling and the indicators.
Marcel, this next question I'm going to direct at you. I guess as you were building the index, were there any sort of early indicators or interesting comparative factors that surprised you? Like when you looked at a couple of indicators together, does it suggest that there may be sort of an area for future study? Anything surprise you that you're like excited to look more into?
Yes, thanks for the question. Definitely. One of the things that, given the time constraints, we were not able to fully flesh out in the white paper, in the report, was a finding asserting that the highest correlations between the social factors was between service occupations, the ones in what we generally refer as frontline workers, and chronic diseases. The strongest correlation was between diagnosed diabetes and service occupations. And so I think that's interesting to try to understand what is explaining that, or if one could then use that to say that is a causality, or is just like a coincidence. So I think definitely that area is one that would be relevant to continue to explore. And in order to do that, we need to kind of do more of that correlation analysis with other variables, and as I mentioned, back in time. So that's one in particular, but I guess the other one related to soft sites and the identification of potential developable parcels would be typically, and what CEQR discloses is floor area ratio and the size of the lot. And those are kind of, make sense. But one thing that is not included, and this also responds to another question that was made about what other data sets that are not necessarily government provided or in New York City's open data portal, is the improvement land ratio. The information that we have, it is based on Department of Finance assessments, and we know that that's not really reflective of actual market value conditions. And so we would have to rely on some third-party data sets to try to have a reliable assessment of that improvement ratio, which in real estate is really one of the most important indicators to define whether a parcel is likely to get developed. So that's an additional metric that I think we need to wrap our heads around and also understand its evolution over time.
Thanks, Marcel. I think all of us have been talking one form or another about sort of the importance of methodology. I think, Tom, I'm going to direct David's question to you, sort of about the technical manual and how to really get trust in the methodology that the city uses and consistency. I think we have seen.
Excuse my assistant just walked into the picture.
From time to time, as an example, there might be a slightly different approach to evaluating park access, or a particular census tract might be included that might dramatically change the results.
Is this question? Is it David Cuff's question?
Yes. So I guess how do we how do we sort of shore up the technical manual and not just provide access to data?
Yeah, well,
why is the methodology and reforming CEQR to get to the CEQR reform part of TASC? What is the sort of opportunity there and
well,
challenge?
I will say that to David's question, the lead agency is responsible for the environmental review. So they are the one, if the environmental review is deficient and it's challenged in the courts, the lead agency is going to be sued. As we found, and the consultants who did the review were following the guidelines in the CEQR technical manual. And so that was really the grounds for why the case ended up getting reversed, because they were following the guidelines in the CEQR technical manual, no less, no more. And you're right, it's used as the defense in many court challenges. I mean, you're asking about, is there a discussion with city agencies about whether that's the right approach, the approach about democratizing data? Well, to Spencer's point, CEQR is a disclosure process, and you shouldn't have to go digging too far to find the information if you're interested in what's happening in your neighborhood, if there is a rezoning or whatever. So I think that it's incumbent upon lead agency and just the CEQR process and the CEQR regulations that that information is disclosed, and that it's readily available, and that, you know, now that we have so many different platforms for downloading information and doing your own analysis, EISs should have downloadable files so that people can. That's a way of democratizing data, but that's not going to happen, and that's what I think that's the gap that TASC seeks to fill.
That's great. There's another question here about sort of who we're going to partner with in the testing over the next year. I think that's both testing and research. And so I think on the testing side, you know, we hope to engage with community partners from all 5 boroughs that have a wide range of experience with land use planning, and also sort of specific or nuanced perspectives. And so we'll be looking to work with business improvement districts and other business organizations, historic preservation organizations, neighborhood groups, community boards, council staff, city agencies, to share the progress of the tool, to ensure that there is sort of trust in that the methodologies that we've landed on are really accurate and answering the questions that we are posing, so that there can really be buy-in from all of the different stakeholders and users that the tool is sort of accurately describing the data and supporting some really great nuanced questions that can really improve those processes. And I think as it moves forward, well, the hope is that this interactive map will also be you know, searchable and queryable, and that the data will be accessible for download, depending on, there's lots of decisions about what scale that data needs to be available, how that functions, whether that's a spreadsheet or a summary table or a map. But that's part of the building out of the interactive map. And so, yes, parcel data, but to what degree and what form, to be decided.
Just wanted to add that we will also be releasing RFPs for spatial analysts or other organizations or individuals looking to help with our predictive modeling. And we're also looking for developers to help us create a web map in partnership with our outreach through our Livable Neighborhoods program, or other outreach strategies. And there's also a question that I saw that went by about the indicators. So just wanted to reiterate that those are all of the methodology, sources, and explanations of each indicator are in the index, which is in our white paper.
Great. So I think I'm going to give one more moment. To reiterate the earlier question around this data set is built on publicly accessible data currently. So all of the information is available. Some of that compiling down to the parcel level data set, as you say, is will be a function of the map. But in terms of democratic access, that's one of the values of open data, is that you can see our methodology, you can replicate our methodology to see if you get the same result, and making sure that that information can be in a more usable form. I think that that's really the thrust of this work, is packaging that information in a way that is being used to ask and answer really relevant land use and environmental review questions. And then being able to pair that with the sort of capacity building for how to then deploy those questions and answers into environmental review, citywide comprehensive planning, and community-based planning. And so it's a combination of both the data and the tools. I hope that that answers your question. We are at time, I believe now. I want to thank everyone for attending this evening. Please go to our website, mas.org/TASC, to get access to the report. I hope that you enjoy Open Data Week and go to many, many more sessions. We're really encouraged by the level of conversation that our citywide partners and city partners are using open data in really new and innovative ways. And we hope that if something sparked your interest tonight, that you'll really stay engaged with this work, with MAS and also with RPA, as both of our organizations are really putting forward a lot of these ideas into new research and work throughout the region. I'll let Marcel add anything if you would like.
Look forward to continue building on this and making it accessible to, the public. So thanks for joining.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.